People often ask me, "Yo, Leon, is Malaysia a good place to live?" Today I'm gonna tell you the truth about Malaysia after I've lived here for 2.5 years. I'll tell you things that you wouldn't be able to learn on Wikipedia, taking a vacation here on the beach, or even looking on the CIA data. The soft side of Malaysia. So, Malaysia. What is Malaysia and what makes it unique? Well, Malaysia is unique in the Southeast Asian sphere because it's probably the most ethnically diverse country, right? It's not like Thailand, it's not like Vietnam, it's not like Taiwan, it's not like Philippines or Indonesia. In those countries, the population are predominantly one race, just like in Korea and China, you find. Uh, but in Malaysia, Malaysia came about as a crossroad of trade. It sits in the Strait of Malacca. In fact, it has a city that's called Malacca. And during the old days, before the Europeans came, most of the intra-Africa, Asia trade, even European trade, go through the route of Malacca. And today it still does. Right? So because of that, city was set up along the strait to facilitate trading, loading, unloading. Merchant came, the city was established, and for the longest time, Malaysia is probably one of the most developed, wealthiest regions. I wouldn't call country because before that there was no countries. There were simply city-states and regions, right, in Southeast Asia, and even today, that history of trade and the people that brought with that and on those enterprises stayed here and have descendants. So today's Malaysia is a mixture of Malays, Chinese, and Indian, and with even and smaller Arabs, Arabics descendants as well as Europeans. During the 1600s, I believe, 15, 1600, Portuguese came and conquered, through their superior firepower, they quickly conquered the kingdoms here, very much in a similar way that it conquered Latin America, Central America, and North America. Right? It found a very indigenous, simple people that didn't have a lot of access to technology and basically took over with guns. Then came the better managed Dutch, and then came the better managed British. So even within colonial power, they fought each other for control of this very valuable, viable trade route and this rich cities and resource around it. By the time British left, British had done quite a bit for Malaysia in the sense that there was a very developed rubber industry, tin industry, which back then was worth a lot of money, and petroleum, later on petroleum. So Malaysia was never historically short of money. However, then if you look at today, you're like, well, if that's the case, Malaysia should be really, really fantastically well off. Why isn't it? Is very quickly losing its position as the second most wealthy country in Asia. And this is where I need to tell you some ugly truths about Malaysia. So, and this is just from an expat's perspective, but I think that because I'm an expat, I am not emotionally, egotistically tied to anything here. I can give you a more honest review of Malaysia than someone who grew up and born here. So when the local people kicked out British colonialism after World War II, when the British colonial empire was collapsing, Malaysian power, the Malays, made a very, I think, fateful decision. What happened was that at that time, in order to gain enough support to become independent, it aligned what we today call West Malaysia, Peninsula Malaysia, where KL, Penang, all the big cities are, with Singapore, with East Malaysia, Sabah, Sarawak, where all the forests, the oil, and the divings are. It aligned them to form a nation, right? They petitioned UK for independence. Of course, you get granted because UK is like, well, we don't really, it costs us too much money to maintain these colonies now. We're not in the place where we used to be 100 years. So let's just give them their freedom, or we trade with them instead of controlling them. It was a very, I think, business-based calculation based on British, and it was the right calculation, right? So what happened was Malays did. So I think Malays suffered quite a bit under the British rule, because they really had nothing to offer for the British, right? The Chinese were merchants, so the British need people to trade and tax. So Chinese were valuable to the British, but Malays, they were land people, they were farmers. What can you possibly offer? The only thing you can really offer is labor. So they're poor, they're laborers. They come city. They probably was made fun of because of their skin color, because of their culture, because they're less sophisticated than the British. Huh? So when the Malays kicked the British out, I think that they want to enjoy that privilege that British had. So they, instead of changing the country for the better, which is like the Singapore, which is everyone's equal and the cream rises to the top, for the most part, they did not replace British system. They simply replaced themselves with the British. So instead of being in the bottom, they went to the top. Kind of like what communists did in China, right? They went from the bottom to the top, but they kept the system in place. The system of stratified society, which if you look at all Anglo-Saxon colonies today, they all have that system. It's all left by the British. So today in Malaysia, we enjoy the same British legislative system, the same British governmental system, and so forth. Is that a good system for Malaysia? My truth is, I don't think so. I think it's very stiff, it's very outdated, and it doesn't really fit the need of the country. So Malaysia, even though it is full of natural resources, what it lacks is knowledge, technology. So how it gained wealth is through a very stupid way, which is extracting resources. And any business person will tell you, economics will tell you, extracting resources is probably the least profitable way, lowest way of creating value, right? The real value is in the higher level: technology, design, innovation, copyright, patents, IP, things like that. Resource, I mean, how much can you sell a mountain of tin for? Not as much as what Apple can sell for a mountain of Apple computers for, that's for sure. And it's very polluting, it's very dirty, it hurts the environment, right? But but Malaysians didn't really. The people come here who can actually make things happen are the Chinese. And as you find across Southeast Asia, and there's a reason why Chinese families across Southeast Asia are so wealthy, and they tend to be economically in much better places than the indigenous population, because they have the work ethic, they have the organization, and they have the mind to learn very quickly, absorb new information, absorb technology, incorporate it into their lives. Whereas the Malays and the Indian here does not so much have that, and they're trying to. This is not for lack of effort, but culturally there's barriers. Right? There's barriers, and it's not an easy topic to talk about. It really is not, because it's touched a lot on sensitive racial, cultural stuff. But I'll be honest with you, because my channel is real talk, and I'm only telling you my perspective. So the fateful decision they made of putting themselves on top, and we solidify the society where the small number of Malays sitting on top, control a vast majority of the wealth. Then they keep power by convincing the rest of the Malays that are uneducated or less educated and doesn't control any resource to vote for them out of fear that the Chinese or the Indians or all the other majority will take over the country and make them essentially economic slaves. So what you have today is basically a very ineffective government that are scrambling and fighting among powers. This is upper class that are quibbling amongst each other for the control of the country, and no one can really give the care about how the country is truly developing or which way each country is going. The Chinese are effectively locked out of the government because they are not allowed legally to hold any important post, governmental post. Right? You have a very ineffective sultan kingdom system where sultan really don't have any real power. The sultan doesn't have any real power, so they couldn't jump in and really take control of the country to lead it to a direction. And then the Indians, they never really achieve. The well-to-do Indians left already, or they have a business interest but they live abroad. And then there's a educated class Indians, but they don't have any political power, so they basically keep their head down and do what they're told, right? And just do their job and hopefully make an okay living. And you have Chinese, which are very frustrated with things because they really do want the country to do well because they live here. They are Malaysians by any measure, but they cannot enact any change. The only thing they're allowed to do is do business. So all they can do is basically make their money and do what Indian does. Is when they get rich enough, they move to Singapore, they move to Australia, they move to UK, they move to America, take their money with them, and say, F you to Malaysia. And this is sad. This is sad because there's so much talent here. There's so much possibility here. If the politics stop playing with fear, and this is what I see everywhere in democracy, in my democracy today. That's where I'm so frustrated with democracy. Democracy is no longer about freedom. It's about choice for people. It's about the powerful elite ruling class selling their idea of how society should run to the lower class, and the lower class is buy wholesale out of fear because they own so little and their position is so tenuous in life. They're afraid to lose it, and so they blame everybody else around them that are different from them. Instead of working together to build a better country, they basically grab as much as they can. And there's not much to grab in the bottom anyway. All the resources, all the power, all the good stuff on top, and the top aren't sharing. The top is selling bullshit to you, so you vote the way they want you to vote. How is this a great form of government? And that's what's shackling Malaysia. You look at Singapore. Singapore 40 years ago had nothing, had no resource, had no money, had nothing. It was left alone 50 years ago. The value currency was 1-to-1 with Malaysian ringgit. Today, Singapore is 4-to-1. 4-to-1 to Malaysian ringgit. Imagine if Singaporeans if Lee Kuan Yew wasn't kicked out of Malaysia, and he won control of the government in Malaysia, where would Malaysia be today as a country? With all the resources of East and West Malaysia plus Singapore. Just think about that. Malaysia will be richer than Korea, right? It will be richer than Korea. It will be more successful than Korea. It will be an economic force to be reckoned with, not just across Southeast Asia, or Asia. You'd be globally a reckoned force to be with. But unfortunately, that's not how the story turned out, right? And this fear that Malay has, we cannot cede power, let Chinese gain our government, cede power. Then they go take over everything and they're going to make us economic slave. It's unfounded. It really, to me, is unfounded. Why? Why would Chinese do that? What do they have to gain? Is Chinese really also united? They love each other like brothers? No, the Chinese fight against themselves all the time, too. And also, if you just look at Singapore, there are plenty of Malays, there are plenty of Indians living in Singapore. How are they doing? The Malays in Singapore are living a lot better than Malays living in Malaysia. So are the Indians. So let me ask you, is this fear of racist-based fear, culture-based fear that plagues in Malaysia, that plagues America, that plagues all these supposedly democratic world, is it really good for society? Does it really take society in the right direction? Or does it really hold society back and divide people? And this is the thing that I learned traveling the world, seeing the world with my open eyes instead of dogmatic idealism. As the world is not what is being sold to the people, at least not as it's sold in the West. Get out in the world, travel, see the world, see the different form of government, see the different form of democracy. There are failed democracies, there are successful democracy. There are failed communists and successful communists. There are failed socialist systems, there are successful capitalism. And there's even failed dictatorship and there's successful dictatorship. And there's failed loyalty, kingdom systems where there are still kings and queens, royal feudalist system, and there are successful ones. Right? Saudi Arabia is a successful one. UAE is a successful one. They're not democracy. They're ruled by royal families, but they're very successful. Qatar, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, just to name a few. So I hope this message are heard by the Malays to stop being afraid of losing the little they have. Open up, embrace, absorb change. Don't buy to your stupid politicians, the Malay politicians. Let the capable, able people rise in the government, rise in public servants. Only when the government is managed by the most capable, the most able, can society move forward. When the government is run by fear-mongering, self-interest idiot, then the country is going nowhere, and it's still going nowhere fast. Within 5 years, Malay will not even be a major player. Within 10 years, economically, Malay would not be a major player in Southeast Asia. It will be overshadowed by Thailand, by Vietnam for sure, by Indonesia, and eventually by Philippines. And then what's going to happen? Right? Let people who are able come into the government, whatever their race. If they're Indian, let the Indian in. If they're Middle Eastern, let the Middle Eastern. If they're Chinese, let the Chinese in. Whoever. Because how you develop a country is let able people manage it, not let a bunch of idiots run the place. And this is a word to the Chinese in here. Come together, find a worthy leader like Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore. When Lee Kuan Yew was kicked out of Malaysia, nobody was here to fill his big shoes. No one was brave enough, have a vision enough to say, you know what, it's not okay what will happen here in Malaysia. It's not okay this path that the Malays has chosen for its country. This country belongs to everyone. Everyone has come together and form a party that has a vision, has capable to lead its people, whether it's Chinese people, Malay people, Indian people, lead people to a better place so Malay can regain its rightful place as the leader of Southeast Asia. That's what I have to say today. That's all I have to say for today.